This is Shining Light on Classroom AV Usage. My name is Kiana Felker. I'm a Senior Client Technologies Analyst at Pepperdine University. I am going to be reading entirely from a script that I prepared, so that's why I'm looking here and not at you. Sorry, I did not have the time to practice to be more engaging. So, I work in the AV office where our primary responsibility is overseeing AV systems in classroom and event spaces on Pepperdine's Malibu campus. At Pepperdine, we have 4 campuses in Southern California. Malibu is our main one, but we also have satellite campuses on 3 different cities in SoCal. Today, I'm going to be talking about classroom AV systems and a project that's helping us see the full picture of how classroom AV systems are actually being used, not just when things go wrong, but when they're working as intended. It isn't just about fixing problems, it's about gaining a more comprehensive understanding of how our classrooms are used so that we may design classrooms that more fully meet the needs of all of our faculty and students. We're going to start with what one of our standard classroom AV systems looks like at Pepperdine. This is a simplified line graph of what we have going on in one of our standard classrooms. There's a lot of components here, but we're going to focus on the basic input-output components of the diagram. So we've got our green here is like the control, touch panel to control. Everyone knows what a switcher processor is, hopefully. As the heart of our system. In red, we have our inputs here. So there's 4 here, but this one's actually 2, our HDMI and or USB-C cables that connect. So 5 total inputs in a standard room. Then we have an in-room PC, wall plate input, and Blu-ray player. And then our output is usually 1 output. Most of the time it's a projector. If you can hear me breathing. All right, how do we know when there's a problem? For a long time, we've relied on faculty telling us when something isn't working, going to the room, fixing it, and moving on. But what about what the faculty don't tell us? I would guess it's a pretty common experience for everyone here to have someone come in hot complaining about how some AV component hasn't worked for weeks. And you're thinking, that's so crazy because nobody told me, the AV technician. At Pepperdine, we have an AV issue hotline ready for requests for immediate assistance or issue reporting. We have a 24/7 helpline for general technology issues that can be transferred to our ticketing queue if needed. And we're available by an office email. But just recently, we were told by a faculty member that she doesn't report issues because she feels like she doesn't have the time to. So she'll just operate with faulty equipment for multiple semesters without anybody knowing. Outside of individually checking over 100 classrooms across multiple campuses, how do we monitor that? Furthermore, what do we know about working classrooms? We assume most of the time when we don't have any issue reports that they're working fine, but clearly that's not necessarily true. We do a yearly IT survey at Pepperdine, but it's an IT-wide survey, and our classroom technology only takes up one small question of that survey. So it's hard to get complete feedback from faculty. We don't have an opportunity for a real, full picture of how our classrooms are being used. For example, how often is the Blu-ray player that's in every classroom on campus actually used? If we ask our faculty, they'll tell us Blu-ray players are a necessity, but are they in every single classroom? Are they maybe used more in classrooms belonging to the fine arts and humanities divisions, but not so much in natural sciences or business? Or wall plates. Our faculty complain at large about wall plates. The port becoming loose, causing the display to flicker, wall plate cables going missing, etc. You can see this very sad port there that has curled the sides. I don't know how they did that. Which raises the question, could we just remove wall plates altogether? Like we saw before, we have a USB-C and HDMI input at the rack, so do they need the wall plate? How can we find this out? How often are they used? Who are they used by? We think that our undergraduate faculty are more used to using in-room PCs than our graduate faculty. So we suspect the graduate faculty prefer bringing their own devices. Could we confirm for sure that that's true? Are wall plates then used more by graduate faculty and therefore more of a priority in graduate classrooms? I've also noticed in some rooms the wall plate is right next to the podium with the bring your own device inputs, the HDMI and USB-C. Maybe in these rooms, wall plates are used less and could be removed without being missed, but in others, just because of where the rack is located, they're still a necessity. All of these little disorganized questions come back to the larger question: how are our classrooms being used? We're going to find this out from knowing what inputs are being used, when they're being used, and how long. We can then answer questions like, how does classroom usage differ between graduate and undergraduate classrooms, classrooms belonging to different divisions, or classrooms belonging to different buildings? We can also compare individual classrooms themselves. You might be thinking, why does this matter? I know how much I care about how faculty use classrooms. They go in, they project a presentation, and lecture. Sometimes they'll play a video, maybe. Well, that may be true most of the time. Without data, we're guessing. That means we might be maintaining, designing, or even investing in technology based on incomplete information. At Pepperdine, we have a yearly classroom AV refresh. Every year, about 20% of our classrooms are selected to have their AV equipment refreshed. The idea being that no classroom should have an AV system older than 5 years. Each year is an opportunity to improve our AV systems to better suit our faculty members' needs, but only a vocal few will contribute to the process. Right now, we are limited to, at most, only half of the story, whatever faculty are willing to share a report. And while faculty feedback and issue reporting is essential and incredibly valuable, it's also inherently unreliable and biased. Sorry if any faculty are in here, you're probably the good ones. If we could know the reality of how our classroom AV systems are being used, we could have the full story. Our solution in attempting to find this information comes in the form of Global Viewer Enterprise, or GVE, which is Extron's tool for monitoring AV systems in real time. This is now about to become an Extron ad because Extron is what we use at our campus. Does anyone here use Extron on their campuses? Okay. Does anyone use Global Viewer already? All right, sick. All right, so you guys know this. For the people who don't, Global Viewer is a server that connects to our classroom processors and tells us exactly what's being used, when, and for how long. It also offers tools for remotely supporting our AV systems. And we're going to do a brief tour so you can kind of visualize what I'm talking about. All right. This is our main help desk hub for what we've got set up. On the side, there's a customizable location tree. So we've got this is the tree, all at Pepperdine. We have different campuses here, and then splits up into a building here. These are all different buildings on the Seaver campus. And then within that, we've got room numbers. On each of these, right now we're looking at AC 286, which is one of our classrooms. Each of these rows here is a device that is connected to the processor in the room. We have for each of these devices, room name. I can see the status. That green means we're connected. That red means something's wrong. We just don't bother to set up the Blu-ray players. Power status here for our display device, which is going to be this Panasonic video projector. We can see the input source right now is the PC. If a professor was in this room and decided, I'm going to switch to connect my laptop because I have a presentation on my laptop via HDMI, that will change to HDMI in near real time. We got lamp hours here. What else do I want to point out? I can also connect remotely. This top one here is the touch panel. By clicking over here, I can connect remotely to that touch panel so that when a professor calls saying that the projector isn't working, I can see this and see that they have the projector mute button selected. By connecting remotely, I can control the AV system in this room and unmute that projector for them. It takes seconds to access this, whereas to help them in person, depending on where they are on campus, it could take 5 to 15 minutes to get to them. While we're looking here, this is a little tangential. When we were implementing GVE, we also added these status indicators to show whether or not the signal input is being received by the switcher. Our theory was that if we got a call that there isn't video feed making it to the projector, we would know that the signal isn't making it to the switcher at all if this is red and it says input not received. If it's green and there's still no image, we know that the issue is happening on this switch or output half of things. So I could check all of this while on the phone to think about, as they're talking to me, think about what the solution to the problem is.
In other words, you ask them, is that indicated on that out?
So you can ask them to kind of like buy time, but I can also just open this up on my computer while I'm on the phone with them and see what it looks like. Anyway, this is all cool remote troubleshooting and informational stuff on the side, but the fun stuff for our solution comes in the form of the reporting tab, which I need to click back over here. All right, here's a picture of our input usage report. This is the recorded inputs for that same room, AC 286, for 3 months from April 14th, which I took a couple weeks ago. Each one of these rows is an input use. For example, in this second row here, if a professor comes in, they turn it on, they use the PC, go through their class, it lasts about 2 hours, then they leave, second professor comes in, they have their presentation on their laptop, they switch it over to HDMI. The whole time the first professor was using the PC, the processor is recording from the projector like, hey, we're using the PC input right now. That second professor comes in, switches it over. This shows up as a report, shows you like what time it's been there. And then next professor's in, the projector is telling the processor, I'm using the HDMI input right now. When they are done with their class, they shut the system down after 2 hours. And then this third line comes up here for 2 hours of HDMI use.
Will it log changes, for instance? So like if the professor came in and used HDMI and then he changed to the classroom PC, will it log?
It would. So yeah, for each entry, we have our columns, location, room, type. This is all going to be video projector because that's the output display we have in here. Model, manufacturer, device name, average daily usage, and then these 4 columns are kind of what we're focusing on, the meat of our information, which is going to be the input source name, input on, input off, and the total input time. So that's what input is being used, when did it start, when did it stop, and the total amount of time it was used in hours. And that's what we want. That's the other half of our story. How are the classrooms being used? How did we get to this? I'm getting ahead of ourselves. How did we even get to this point to where this is working? It's sometime in fall 2023 when I joined my AV team. Previous attempts at utilizing GVE had been made years ago, but in its current state, it wasn't collecting any data and didn't allow for any remote troubleshooting. We needed to reset up GVE and configure all of our classrooms to report to our GVE server in the first place, create that location tree, all that. How do we begin to rebuild our GVE system? After many calls with our GVE expert from Extron, Davis, those of you who do GVE all know Davis? Yes. He talks really fast. We love Davis. We established a plan to bring back GVE online over the summer of 2024 so that by the fall semester of 2024, we would be ready to collect a full academic year's worth of classroom AV usage data. Our first roadblock was that not all of our processors were connected to the network. No network connection, no connection to GVE. But we didn't know which processors were connected to the network from the previous attempts at GVE, which classrooms had an available network port to connect to the processor. If there was an available port, does it need to be activated? And how many and how long of Ethernet cables would we need to connect them all? So our first step in implementing GVE was to do a network audit for all of our Malibu classrooms to find out this information. After we found out which rooms had available network ports and which of those ports needed to be activated and how many Ethernet cables we needed to connect our processors to the network, we still needed to make a couple of decisions regarding GVE implementation. When updating a room's program file for GVE, you have to give names to the inputs you want to see reported. We realized that our classroom systems had inconsistent labeling between each room for the same inputs. For example, bring your own device HDMI input could be labeled HDMI, others were labeled HDMI cable. Or for the in-room PCs, the input could be named PC, in-room PC, etc. This is not great as far as data collection goes, since we would have input reports for the same type of device split up into multiple names. Most of our classrooms have the same 5 input types, like I said earlier, with some variations. So we standardize all of the names of our inputs to PC, HDMI, USB-C, Blu-ray, wall plate cables. Now we're only seeing 5. We standardized this both on the GVE reporting side and on the user interface side. So now the same terminology is displayed for both users and technicians for consistency. Now for implementation, we needed to collect, modify, and re-upload every program file for our classroom AV systems, which would be easy to do if the processors were connected to our network, but from the network audit, we knew that more than half of them were not. So we went room by room to physically connect the processors to the network and configure each in person. I then put together a 16-page how to implement GVE document, a step-by-step with screenshots for reference that outlines how to do the following. First, we collected all of the previous program files in our drives to have as backups in case our changes went awry. Then we made a copy to make the desired changes to configure for GVE connection, as well as a couple of other changes like the signal status indicator and the input name changes to be standardized. Once the changes had been made and a modified file uploaded, we created a classroom instance for the room on GVE. That was on the side, that location tree. You have to create an instance for that. And connected each processor to its instance. And finally, we tested to make sure that it all worked, that each classroom's in-room functionalities were maintained through the change, and that GVE was showing reports for that room as the input was changed. We kept a spreadsheet to track our progress as each of these tasks was completed in each room. And once we were done, we stored all of the instructional and tracking documentation so that when we needed to do this again in the future, like after equipment is refreshed every summer, that we have that documentation for reference. And then we're done, but not really. Now it's time for data collection, which is the whole point. We wanted comprehensive, unbiased insights into our classroom use, and to get that, we need the data. After some data cleanup and error fixing on the system reporting side of things, we had that data collecting on our server for one academic year to have that one nice, neat 1-year report of system usage to evaluate. And that's where we are now. This week is finals week at Pepperdine, so spring semester completes in 2 days. So what's next? Next, I find the time to clean through the data collected this year and create a bunch of data visualizations to summarize the year. I'll be looking for patterns or trends to answer questions like, how does classroom usage differ between classrooms belonging to the different divisions of our undergraduate schools? How does it differ between our graduate schools on Malibu campus? How does it differ between buildings? And are there grounds to get rid of Blu-ray players and or wall plates in at least some of our classrooms? While I didn't have time to put together that whole report for this presentation, and with classes not officially being done until Friday, we did look into some insights just to answer that last question. Here's the input usage for undergraduate schools that we had up to the point that we took this report. Each of these columns is an input type. I know dot cam is here because there are like 3 rooms that have dot cams. That's why that one's there. Local is going to be a combination of HDMI and USB-C. Going down the list, each of these different bars is a different school. We've got business, communications, fine arts, humanities, international languages, natural sciences, religion. Pepperdine is this one auditorium that's owned by nobody, and social science. So yeah, take like 10 seconds to look at this graph, and then I'm gonna ask this, I know I haven't asked for interaction this whole presentation, but right now, tell me something that you notice about this. There's not, is there? Anything else? In-room computer is used. We'll talk about that. One more. Yes. Right, there's specific ones that are being used, or specific divisions that use them more. All right, first of all, Blu-rays, not super used. The 2 divisions that use them most here are International Languages and Humanities division. We think for international studies, this may be because they have DVD media they use to practice foreign language. For both, they may just have more DVD media for historical documentary type of content. So maybe we don't need the Blu-rays in our other divisions. I would have to zoom in to like be sure, but like some of these bars are not there. I don't see communications, business, or natural sciences that use the Blu-ray at all. Now for wall plates, it's also pretty low usage for everyone except for natural sciences, which is this one, and maybe fine arts is that yellow one.
Can I ask you a clarifying question? Is that units decided because each of those schools occupies a certain building?
Yeah, so each of our classrooms is owned by a division.
And you can be sure that some other department isn't using that.
We can, yeah, because they assign professors' classrooms for the semester based on the division's ownership of the room. Yeah. All right, so yeah, pretty low for everyone except for natural science and maybe fine arts. Natural sciences, we think because some of our natural sciences rooms are awkwardly configured, the AV has to be configured around the lab equipment and like the lab tables and stuff. So the wall plates are at the front of the room, they're consistent. Natural sciences maybe uses the wall plates more because their rooms are more variable as to how accessible their AV rack inputs are. Natural sciences also is the only division here that uses the local inputs more than the in-room computer. So in-room computers use them more except for natural sciences, and I think that's C-routines, we don't care about that one. But we could break down even further into the different types of natural sciences rooms, labs versus lecture rooms. Like just from this, there's so much more that we would have to dig into to really find answers. Even so, you can see how much more, like you pointed out, how much more everybody uses the in-room computers except for natural sciences. Did I click on this? Probably. Compared to graduate schools, number one is now wall plates. We think this is because our undergraduate faculty have always had the in-room PCs, whereas our graduate faculty only got the in-room PCs during COVID. So they're more accustomed to bringing their own stuff even after 5 years. Now to scroll. Oh, I scrolled all the way to the end of my presentation here. Yes, okay. So what's after next? As we look into the data further, we'll have all this information to evaluate for next summer's AV refresh. Like I mentioned earlier, we refresh about 20% of our rooms each year so that no AV system is more than 5 years old. But now that we can collect this data, some rooms we could find are older or more worn than others because of their disproportionate use. They have a true use age rather than a time age. Using this data, we could evaluate which rooms may need the refresh more just because they've worn more than others, even if they aren't as old time-wise. Furthermore, because we didn't know this information before, every room had to be able to do everything. Every room needs the Blu-ray players and the wall plates. Now that we have this information, we know that's not actually necessary. Maybe we don't need Blu-ray players in rooms that don't belong to international studies or humanities. Wall plates maybe aren't needed in rooms that aren't natural sciences or fine arts. We can use this information to then fine-tune our systems per our rooms to make it better for our faculty, save money, that type of thing. Even beyond that, in the future, we may look into matching our AV system usage data with our classroom scheduling system, 25 Live. That way we could find out who is linked to each of these input usage reports and how individual faculty members may differ in classroom use. We dream of finding out who our middle 80% of users are, how they use the rooms, and how they use the rooms, we can identify what are the core components of our classroom systems that as we innovate, we need to like keep those crucial components that 80% of everybody uses. Our top 10%, we could reach out for feedback and collaboration as we look to innovate for future classrooms. And our bottom 10%, we can reach out to and see how they're doing. And then finally, throwback to my coworker Kevin's presentation. This year we moderated GVE to see how it did on our Malibu campuses. So this year, this summer, now we are going to extend it to our 3 satellite campuses and start collecting data to make similar evaluations. And that's it. That's all I have. I'm open to questions. And then at the same time, those of you who have GVE, those of you who think this is cool and have questions that you would want to know for your school, hit me with suggestions as I'm about to look into this report and find stuff about my school. I'd love to hear it. Our main campus, so our main Malibu campus is 110 classrooms, I think. Is it like 80 are undergraduate and 30 are up at Drescher and the graduate campus? Yeah.
And have you ever thought about using your data from your ticketing system to see what classrooms get the most calls, to see what needs updated that way?
I think we do evaluate our ticketing system. It's kind of, the GV is kind of like a new thing. So this is more about like what inputs are being used, how it's being used, especially when there aren't problems. We do use our ticketing data to evaluate for the AV refresh.
Presupposes people are notifying us about things.
Yeah, which, you know, yeah, we learned, yeah, some people do not.
We get workstation students and they do PMs they have to hit every room twice a year, right? So that's how we find the problems ahead of time. Otherwise, they won't get reported. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We'll do it twice a year room check as well on our main campus.
Likewise, the survey that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
You're only going to hear from the loud ones or whatever, but did this corroborate or contradict anything that you got from that? And did you give up that survey for this, or you still do both?
We still do both. So the survey is we're in AV, which is a part of our larger IT department. So we're in a branch of our IT department called Client Services. So that survey is for all of IT. And then there's a portion of it that's for Client Services. And then there's one question that's about AV, like classroom systems. So we still ask them because, again, the feedback is valuable to get when they're willing to offer it. This is just in supplement to find out what's happening all the time. So we can kind of get that more complete picture of how the rooms are being used. That's not just based on what faculty are willing to report.
I was just curious because you made a kind of a joke about everybody says they use Blu-ray. Was that based on something, or is that just
So I think for the refreshes, we'll like ask for faculty feedback. So when we ask like, hey guys, you guys still use the Blu-rays? Like we're gonna do the refresh again this summer. Do we still put these in? Then whoever is gonna say something says yes. And then whoever, like vast majority of them, nobody says anything. So then we just have a yes.
That was up with the common CSV feeding into the AI. What's the point of that using forecasting based on kind of your build and your use case and model that out to see where your forecast is actually going?
I don't know that. See, I have not done the report yet. We pulled up that little like graph just for this presentation, but yeah, that's my next step is to look into the process, and I'm going to document the process as well as how we want to evaluate the questions we want answered, what systems we're going to use, if we're going to use like CSVs, if I'm going to try to do R or Python or what to make visualizations or just sheets.
CSV and start throwing at Copilot and start putting your standard builds in there, and they'll start forecasting and telling you where your money's going to go.
Yeah. All right. Anything else? Once, twice. We're free to go.